We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And we, Tom and Rob, feel like probably sticking to the home theater and AV questions this week, because if we go into any tangents, we're not in the best of moods this week. I mean, we'll put that as context, but yes, we had our whole discussion about gripes and negativity and world events and going on tangents and all that stuff. But we're like, you know what? We don't really feel like going on tangents this week too much. We might anyway, but yeah, that's where we are.
So, what'd you watch, Rob?
Yes, what we watched. So I watched Star Trek Section 31.
Is this a show?
Well, that's the interesting thing of this. When Star Trek Section 31 was originally announced, it was announced as a new series, a spin-off from Star Trek Discovery. That's how it was initially announced. And when it was first announced, they greenlit it for 2 seasons immediately. That was the first announcements of it. And now this was because on Star Trek Discovery, for the first handful of episodes, and then they managed to bring her back as a guest star in a recurring role throughout the series, Michelle Yeoh.
Yes.
Was a character called Philippa Georgiou. And they had a mirror universe version of that character, because Star Trek has their mirror universe where the people, everybody who was good is evil and vice versa, and they had the goatees and everything like that. And so they followed
Tom's
on.
growing a goatee, so I guess I'm in my evil phase. Go on.
So Star Trek Discovery initially, when it began, was taking place just prior to the original series of Star Trek. That's in the timeline where Discovery began. It didn't finish there because they do a whole time travel thing, being Star Trek in that. But anyway, this character of Philippa Georgiou, portrayed by Michelle Yeoh, became a fan favorite. And so they decided, hey, we're going to do a spin-off series, because she agreed. She was willing to do it, starring role in her own Star Trek series. And they're like, hey, if Michelle Yeoh says she's willing to do that, we're by golly going to make ourselves a spin-off series. But that was kind of all in the works, and the pandemic hit, and then the writer's strike hit, and then the actors' strike hit, and then Michelle Yeoh went and won herself an Oscar. Ooh. And all of that kind of led to, we're not actually going to do a series anymore. Okay. But all the work that had gone into it, and Michelle Yeoh was still gung-ho to play this character. It was never her saying that she was done with this character.
Is she good or is she evil? I don't know anything about it. I mean, I just see the pictures, and she looks kind of on the evil side.
Well, she's from the mirror universe, this person. So not only was she evil, she was like the worstest evil in the whole universe.
That must
but
be
of course,
fun to play.
She spent her time with the Discovery crew and rediscovered her humanity and all that type of stuff. So if you're not familiar at all with Section 31 in Star Trek, this is not a brand new thing. It was kind of most overtly introduced in Deep Space Nine. That's where they actually had people from Section 31 come in. And the whole idea of Section 31 is that they are the Mission Impossible group within Star Trek, within the United Federation of Planets. They are disavowed. They are doing the unseemly, dirty work to keep
the Black Ops.
They're the Black Ops to keep the Federation safe, that the Starfleet does not officially recognize them, will never admit that they actually exist, but when underhanded things need to be done in the name of safety for the Federation, Section 31 are the people that they send. And since they have this mirror universe version of Philippa Georgiou, she's the perfect person to put in Section 31, because in the Prime universe, her character is not there anymore, so everybody thinks that she's dead anyway, and then she was like the biggest, baddest person ever, but rediscovered her humanity and all that type of stuff. So it looked like it was going to be very interesting. Now, Section 31, when they introduced them in Deep Space Nine, they played it straight. They were like, this is like, Deep Space Nine was probably the most like our real world, where there are all kinds of shades of gray, and everything isn't just happy, and everything isn't just,
right.
post-commercialism and all that type of stuff in the Star Trek universe. It was the more sort of gritty and grounded and dark, and they played Section 31 very, very straight in Deep Space Nine as a very serious thing and a very troubling thing to have in the Star Trek universe.
Sure.
Now, it was pretty clear from all of the original talk and from the trailers that they showed. So I didn't make it clear. This Star Trek Section 31 is a TV movie. That's what it is. They aren't doing a series anymore, but they decided not to throw away all the work they had done on it, and they made it a TV movie. So that's what this is.
Had they already filmed it, and then they just made a movie out of what they had filmed, or did they film this specifically?
So, I mean, they yeah, I don't know exactly all the machinations behind the scenes.
Of course.
But that's what this is. It's a TV movie. It's about an hour and 45 minutes or so. And so it was pretty clear from all the early trailers and stuff that they were going for more of a Mission Impossible type of vibe, right? They're a little bit lighter, a little bit more humor added to it. They're doing the sort of dark and underhanded things, but you're not really gonna fear or dislike any of the characters that you're gonna follow in this. They want it to be a little bit more lighthearted. And so it's a bit tricky because simultaneously in this movie, it feels very much like it could have been a pilot. It feels like, this is like a 2-part pilot to what would have been a series. But at the same time, they throw in so many plot things that it was kind of clear of, this was intended to be an entire first season's worth of twists or character development that they tried to shrink into a single less than 2-hour movie. It's trying to play it both ways. And again, you can imagine that if this had been a weekly series, there would have been some episodes that were much more comedy and some episodes that tried to be a bit more serious and some episodes that tried to, tug at your heartstrings a little bit more. You can easily, Star Trek has always done that, right? The tone from episode to episode of any Star Trek series has not been 100% consistent. Some of them are more comedy, some of them are more serious. And so it very much feels like they tried to just crush all of that into a single 1 hour and 45-minute movie. And for that reason, it can't work. There's no way you can do that in this amount of time. There's no way you can have a character or two die in this movie and feel the same emotional impact as if you had followed them for an entire season of a TV show.
Sure.
And so some relationships get condensed down to a glance between a couple of characters. That's what happens when you're condensing it all down to an hour and 45 minutes. So unfortunately, it's not a great movie all on its own. I'm not really sure how you would come into this if you hadn't seen any of Star Trek Discovery, if you had no idea who at least Philippa Georgiou was. It would be tough. They try to do the little Mission Impossible brief at the very beginning to give you some idea of who she is so that, somebody could conceivably watch this movie all on its own. But it's really tough to see how you could honestly watch this movie all on its own. And then as a movie, it doesn't quite work. So, and then it does have a very different feel from anything else of Star Trek, which we should have expected being Section 31, but it isn't quite the actually dark and serious tone that you might have gone for. They tried to kind of keep it light and humorous. And so, this also stars Casey Roll. She's one of my favorite actresses. She's from Canada. Been in lots of series that I've enjoyed, and she's probably the best part of this movie, along with Michelle Yeoh. The director had the good enough sense where one of the things I've always appreciated about Casey Roll's acting is that when she isn't speaking, when her character isn't speaking, she's someone who stays in character 100% of the time and always gives great nonverbal reactions. That's one thing that she always does. And this director had the good sense of like, you know what, let's just keep a camera on her, and whenever she gives a good reaction, we'll just cut to her character giving a nonverbal reaction. And that's where a lot of the sort of humor and flavor of this movie ends up coming from, is her just nonverbal reactions to things. And she's the only like straight-laced Star Trek type of Federation person in this whole crew. So she's playing the foil to everybody else in this group who are all the misfits that don't fit anywhere else in Starfleet. So I did enjoy her performance, but it's condensed, it's short. We don't get a full character arc because there just isn't time to do it. So yeah, it's really tough. I can't give it a thumbs up or a hearty recommendation. You kind of have to really be into Star Trek to watch this movie. And then even if you are, you're either not gonna like that it doesn't feel like Star Trek very much, or you're going to wish it had been the series that had been envisioned in the beginning, and there's kind of no way to feel satisfied watching this TV movie, Star Trek Section 31. So unfortunate, because I wanted to like it, but that's where we ended up. But Michelle Yeoh is always watchable.
Sure.
There's probably too much action in this. It's kind of like, we need to move along with some of this plot and character instead of lingering so long on this action scene because we're running out of time in this TV movie. I had that sort of feeling, but they wanted to have the action in it. So, and then, just production wise, it looks more like a modern Star Trek show, which they've gone really up and up in production quality, right? Star Trek Discovery, like the first few episodes of Star Trek Discovery, I was like, wow, that's like movie quality that they're giving there. So it's to say that it's more along that line of production level is not really a knock against it. It looks good, but it doesn't quite look like a high budget movie because it isn't a high budget movie. So it's in between so many things and trying to be so many things at once that it all just kind of falls apart. So that was it.
I'm looking at pictures of her trying to figure out who she is.
Michelle Yeoh or Casey Roll?
I know who Michelle Yeoh is.
Yes, okay.
She's a Bond girl. Bond woman.
If you watched Hannibal,
we're supposed to say now? I think we're supposed to say
if you watched Hannibal, then Casey Roll played Abigail. If you've watched,
she looks like, and I'm going to say this sounds terrible, I think, to say it out loud, but I think she either has been in so many things that I think she's different people.
Things. Yeah.
Or she looks like a lot of people. It's one of those things where I'm just like, I get confused. Almost
anything that was filmed in Canada, either Toronto or Vancouver area, which is many things, then she's probably been in it. She's one of those.
She's
one of those actors.
She's Canadian, so yeah.
No, but she's
all right. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'll be honest with you. I am so starved for Star Trek content. I love Star Trek. I haven't seen any of the animated stuff.
Well,
and
Lower
I
Decks
really should.
Yeah, get onto Lower Decks. That's it'll help your mood too.
The problem is that I just don't have access to it because it's all
Paramount Plus. Yeah, Paramount Plus.
So, but
right.
And if we get rid of a couple of things, maybe I can convince my wife to get that because I have been a fairly loyal Star Trek fan up until the last couple of years because of things, but Deep Space Nine and I never clicked.
And that was the same for me. I was such a Next Generation fan that the tonal shift to Deep Space Nine was never quite my bag, but I've come to like it a lot more as I get older. That's
and I think it's because, I watched like the first couple of seasons.
Oh, okay.
And,
Before
once he got
Worf
the goatee and started a little bit, I think he kicked the crap out of a Klingon or something like that. And I was like, whoa, okay. He's not just an administrator. Never, the guy. And I guess, I caught some episodes here and there about the Gamma Quadrant and some other things. And I was like, okay, this sounds like it's got a lot going on, but it sounds a little complicated. I don't know if I want to go down that road. But I watched every single episode of Voyager.
Okay.
I think that was back in the days when they were on. I had to set my VHS.
That was like UPN. I think it was UPN back then.
Yes, you're right.
UPN.
You're right. I forgot about that. UPN. Yeah. So I watched every single I watched every single episode of that. I loved that. I watched. I can't say that I watched every episode of Next Generation.
Okay.
But I did. I watched many of them more than once because I would watch the reruns constantly.
Yep.
When they were in syndication. So and of course the original series. During when we were banished from our house after the flood, we went to my brother and sister-in-law's. I guess Roku has channels, right? They have channels that you can watch.
They have their own FAST service, their free ad-supported television service, and then they have
and they have a Star Trek channel, and it's just a Star Trek channel, and it just shows the original series stuff. And I was like, okay, so in case you're wondering what I'm going to be watching when you're not in the room, my lovely wife, it will be Star Trek. It will be nonstop Star Trek because I do not think about this crap. So yes, I feel like I hate being left out in the cold with some of the Star Trek stuff. Because I've just been.
I wasn't the biggest fan of Discovery. That didn't quite click with me. But Strange New Worlds has been a great series, so you got that to look forward to. That's a lot of fun.
And I caught the first season of Discovery, I think, too.
Yeah.
As well when it first came on. But
the second season of Discovery was definitely the best, which is what resulted in the spin-off of Strange New Worlds, because you had Pike and Number One coming on board the Discovery, and then they're like, hey, that's really good. Let's make a whole series about them, and they did. So yeah,
right.
that's where that came from.
All right, let's get to the podcast. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Come to the website. You can find our audio, our show notes, any links to any products or articles we talk about. The link to our Flickr album, where you can follow along with the pictures that we'll be referencing. And older episodes, of course, that have all those same things. Back, what are we on now? 952. There are so many cute dogs being walked right now. The temperature finally went back up, and all I'm doing is watching people walk their dogs right now. It's so great because it's been so cold here, and for us,
cold. Yes.
Well, I mean, it's snowed in Florida, Rob. You can suck
true.
it. That's cold.
Yeah, it doesn't snow here.
It snowed in Tallahassee, where my son is, and he sent me a bunch of pictures, and he was like, "Did you make a snowman?" He goes, "No, it's kind of gross." But yeah, so it did get cold. But
that's true.
You can contact Rob directly, rob@avrant.com. His socials.
Blue Sky. My Blue Sky is First Reflect. That's what I'll say for now. Until it becomes horrible, which is seemingly inevitable, yes, I'm on Blue Sky, First Reflect. Yeah, that's how you can find me.
I am also on Blue Sky. I have never actively
I don't know what your handle is there. I haven't found you.
I have never actively looked at it, but I have made an account. It's not AVRant_Tom, though, because I hated that underscore crap. And I don't think it's AVRant anything. So it's just... And
he hasn't made it secret or anything, but Lee Overstreet is on Blue Sky now as well. And he's gone back to the pun.
Sky?
Yeah, Lee Over Sky, because he's doing the pun base name. So Lee Over Sky is Lee Overstreet on Blue Sky there.
You can contact me directly at tom@avrant.com, though I don't check that email very often because it's all... Yeah. Listeners of the week.
Yes.
I'm going to listen to the week to support... So come and listen to the week, support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, send us a PayPal donation. We had 2 people do that this week. We had David and Eliezer. So thank you very much, David, and thank you, Eliezer, for becoming a PayPal donor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David, Eliezer, for those PayPal donations. Very much appreciate it.
Yeah. We want to thank our patrons over at patreon.com, patreon.com/AVRant podcast, where you can sign up to be a monthly contributor. Every month they'll take some money from you, give most of it to us. We currently have 133 patrons, including Niels. I wonder how Niels. I guess it's got to be just Niels, right?
Well,
it's got to be.
Well, like Niels Bohr, right?
I like how you said that. Like I'm supposed to know who that is.
You don't know? Come on, you know Niels Bohr.
I don't.
You're a famous physicist.
No, sorry, it's not. I mean, I am too old to be embarrassed by ignorance. I have. There's so many things in the world I do not know. It is okay that I do not know who Niels Bohr is, or Bohr, Bohr.
Yes, Bohr.
Single Bohr, multiple Niels. Got it.
Sure, gotcha. Yeah.
Anyways, Niels, who's been a patron ever since Patreon became a thing for us. Thank you very much. And Jorge. So thank you, Niels. Thank you, Jorge. And thank you to our 133 patrons at patreon.com.
That is right. I'll repeat that it is patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. And a big thanks to our 133 patrons over there, Niels and Jorge. Thank you for being 2 of them.
All right, if you can support us financially, support us in some other way, and we'll mention you here. Infinite Gary sent me a movie code to test out for him. And Gary, I haven't had a chance to do that yet. It's been extremely busy couple of weeks for me, trying to figure out what to... I mean, I know I say I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with the house. Some of the weeks that we're trying to figure it out is just us waiting for things to happen.
Sure.
The last 2 weeks have been many things happening.
Yeah,
so,
little different.
In fact, I have to run after this podcast to go meet with an architect, which sounds fancy. It is not going to be as fancy as it sounds because so much has changed since the time I set this meeting to now that the meeting is, my wife's like, I'm not taking time off of work for this crap.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh God. So I got to go down there and try to figure out how I'm going to break the news that everything we told them before is all now different.
Yeah.
But most of that happened in the last week. And we seriously forgot that this meeting was happening until we got a reminder last night. That's like, hey, in 12 hours, you have a meeting. We're like, what? So, yes. Thank you, Gary. I will test out your movie code soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, for sending it all the same. That's right.
Yes. It's got notes of gratitude from people for keeping the podcast going through the slow disintegration of democracy in my country. From Matt Gibb, who's in Newborough, Victoria, Australia, which I have never heard of. And I don't think there's that many places in Australia, so I thought I'd heard of them all, but I apparently missed this one, so it's good to know. He says he tried out retirement a few years ago, but decided to go back to work last year. He's never been one to just sit down and listen to a podcast at home, so he fell about 3 years behind on AVRant, but now that he has a commute again, he's enjoying catching up. He picked up where he left off and is now caught up to episode 860. Brian, who appreciates how we managed to keep our upload schedule consistent despite everything that happened last year. He's also eager to hear any updates about Lee's center speaker upgrade saga. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, if and when that saga ever has an update or a conclusion, we will let you know. As Lee warned, it is a very long process for him to spend any significant amount of money. So, that's ongoing. There's nothing. You haven't missed anything, Brian.
Yeah, you got to remember, it took Lee like 20 years for me to convince him to get a freaking subwoofer. So we are a long way out on this center. Buckle up. It's going to be a long ride. Yep. Karl, who's excited to hear about me using a Peloton. Okay.
Yep.
I still hate it. I'm sorry. I did it again this weekend, though. I did go to a spin class again, and I hated it. I know we're doing a lot of asides here. I'm sorry. But I did... I refuse to do what the instructor says.
Oh, okay.
The first 10, 15 minutes, they're like, stand up, sit down, do this, do that. I'm like, okay. And then after that, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to sit here and pedal at the speed I want to pedal.
Yep.
And afterwards, the instructor was like, Jesus, who was on bike number, my number? And I was like, I didn't say anything. My wife was like, that was him. And she's like, wow, look at those numbers. I'm like, yeah, that's the numbers that happen when I don't do all this stupid stand up, sit down stuff. I just sat there and pedaled and went 20 miles an hour for 50 straight minutes. So there you go. And he says, this is Karl again, who would complain about Rob's laugh? Only he is allowed to complain about anything home theater podcast related.
Yes.
So there you go. Niels says he doesn't want us to change a thing and is glad that we've kept the podcast going. And if we need some optimism, just think about all the global conflicts and wars that haven't started yet.
Yup.
And he is a 3-time member of the 2 Hour Plus Club. So thank you, Niels.
He has proven it for sure. There is no chance that could have been accidental. To
no, he's got that. Yeah. Jorge says he enjoys our banner and agrees that mentions of world events and updates about our personalized ads context. He thinks we keep it brief enough, so he likes our format, including the What We Watch segment and Rob's laugh. You see? Rob's left is a delight. And Max doesn't mind us going off topic from time to time. And in fact, he wouldn't mind if we were even more opinionated since he thinks we're rather conscientious in the way we discuss things. And lastly, Sasi. So let's go through those names again. Okay. So we've got Notes of Gratitude from Matt Gibb, Brian, Karl, Niels, Jorge, Max, and Sasi. Thank you very much for thanking us.
That's right. I'll say the names one more time so they came from my lips. We got Matt, Gibb, Brian, Karl, Niels, Jorge, Max, and Sasi. Thank you all very much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement.
I will say, Jorge, thank you for commenting because I love saying the name Jorge. I just love it. It's like one of my 2 top favorite names to say. And I won't tell you the other one because I say it funny and I think it's offensive the way I say it. I think it's probably culturally insensitive, but I love saying it. So, Jorge, thank you for commenting because I do like saying your name. And I don't know why it is. It's just that there's something about the shape of my mouth when I say it. It just feels good saying it. So I just love that name. Okay. In the news, Sony already announced last year in July that they would be winding down their Recordable media division, both in terms of manufacturing and research. And back then there was confusion about whether this would impact physical disc releases of movies and TV shows, since the wording of Sony's announcement said, all models of Blu-ray disc media, end quote. Mm-hmm. That's a cute puppy. But they were specific... I'm sorry. There's so many
Tom doesn't have enough distractions.
There's so many. The boxer just walked by and I didn't say anything until just now. And believe me, it took doing because I love boxers. But they were specifically talking about recordable Blu-ray discs, and by all models, they meant both BDR and BDRE, as well as any ongoing research for higher capacity recordable optical disc formats. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say that this makes a lot of sense because with solid state drives, who gives a crap?
That's pretty much the way they've been feeling.
Well, now Sony's made it official that made it official that the shutdown will happen in February, and they will completely withdraw from researching or manufacturing any recordable optical discs, including mini discs and mini DVD cassettes as well.
DV,
and once
just
again,
mini DV. Yeah.
What did I say? Mini DV. Sorry. I said
No extra
DVD,
D at the
didn't I?
end.
Yeah, sorry about that.
But mini discs, they were still around, if you didn't know.
Who knew? I know they use stuff like that in recording studios and
Yes, that's right.
stuff like that, yeah. So once again, while there's some confusion online with people thinking this means Sony won't be making any Blu-ray movies, but that is not the case. This is strictly about recordable optical disc formats. Blu-ray and Ultra HD Blu-ray movies and TV shows are not affected, including anything from Sony Pictures, but the complete halt in research does indicate that Sony no longer views optical discs as a viable format for storage purposes. I just bought a terabyte drive for my wife for her computer to back up on. The computer itself, I think, has less than half a gig, but I bought her a terabyte because it was $81, and this thing can be thrown in the ocean. Okay.
That type, yeah.
I'm like, this drive.
I was thinking like finding
something.
even a 1 terabyte hard drive these days is not the easiest thing, but that's probably a solid state and armored and stuff, yeah.
It is. It's solid state. It's armored. It's got, it's basically indestructible. And she's using it for backup on her computer because she's terrified she's going to lose everything off that computer, because we almost did.
Yeah.
Luckily, we just lost the power supply, and that which is like an external. It's in the cable, so we replaced the cable, and it was fine. But
so just mentioning that whole Sony story, because there's been the headlines of like, is this the end of Blu-ray movies? And it's like, no, they're completely separate divisions. One has virtually nothing to do with the other. This is only about the recordable formats, but it is notable that, at this point, the largest backer of recordable optical media is like, we're done with that.
So, do we need to mention that Netflix is increasing their prices yet again? Well, they are. After growing their number of subscribers to over 300 million worldwide and actually being outright profitable, which no other streaming service can claim to be, Netflix has upped their prices as of January 28th in the U.S., Canada, Portugal, and I am so sorry, I cannot say Portugal correctly.
Oh, okay.
It just... I think I said it so wrong for so many years that my mouth won't do it. So I apologize to all the Portuguese people, because something about that name of that country just messes me up. And Argentina. So Argentina, Portugal, Canada, US getting price increases. The new prices are $8 a month for standard with ads, which is an increase of $1. $18 a month for standard without ads, which is an increase of $2.50 a month. Yeah. And $25 a month for premium, which is the only way to get 4K HDR and Atmos, which is an increase of $2 a month. They're not even saying it's because they are now the home of WWE or because of the cost of production or expanding their library of content. They're just confident everyone will pay up and stay subscribed. They did say they're planning to stream more major live TV events after the success of Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, and they're looking to grow their video game division, which I see the video games on there, and I'm never ever clicking on one, nor will I ever.
And everybody who watched that boxing match is also to blame. Why did people watch that boxing match? Why did you do it?
Well, not only, I tell you what, if you didn't learn something from watching that boxing match and realizing that this was a humongous waste of your time and it was all garbage, that convinced me never to watch another thing that was live on there.
Plus, it
wasn't the opposite.
Like the technical side of the streaming didn't work very well for them.
There was all kinds of problems, but whatever. Whatever. Yep. We're just. I mean, I have a hard time with this because I do think that companies should make a profit, and I do want them to make good product. So, you can't keep expecting them to all operate in the red and still put out quality shows. No. If they're not making the money someplace else. Most, and I unfortunately, this is my world, so I know this, and this is what I'm going to refer to, but bike shops do not make money selling you bikes. Okay. That is not how they make money. Yeah. They get you in there because you're buying a bike. But then they make money on the clothes, a lot on the clothes. Okay. The clothes are a huge markup. Apparel, yep. And accessories, and then repairs, of course. But repairs often aren't the money maker you think they are. The more money you spent in your repair, the less money, and oftentimes the bike shop lost money on a big dollar repair because the amount of labor that went into it, they literally, like I've worked on bikes. I worked on this one bike recently. I've probably put 20 hours into that bike on and off. And part of it is because we were just troubleshooting, trying to figure things out, and things weren't working. And we can't charge 20 hours of labor. I mean, that's ludicrous. It would be like $1,400 in labor alone. And no one's, you couldn't buy that bike because that bike is really expensive. But you could buy a nice bike.
You could buy a bike for $1,400. You start getting up to $1,500, $2,000 worth of labor, and it's like, why am I repairing it?
Yes,
I might just buy an entirely
And part of it's
new bike.
our fault because we, if we could figure the problem out immediately, then the problem's an hour or two long, maybe 3 hours long.
Well, why didn't you use AI, Tom? That'll solve it.
Well, the problem is and this is my argument, is like, I'm fine if it's my fault that I can't figure out how to fix your problem. It's a completely different thing if after I finally fixed your problem, I say, "Man, it was weird. It was this." They're like, "Oh yeah, and then you say something that would have told me what the problem was from the beginning. Like, "Oh yeah, I swapped out the for the hydraulic brakes, I switched out the tubing for that because I wanted a different color." Oh, is that why it's leaking from literally everywhere? That we were losing our minds thinking that we had done something wrong, but no, if you just said that. So yes, I want them to make money. I want them to give you a good product. And if they're not making the money someplace on the other end, like if you make a TV show which makes you go to the movies and spend money on the movies or buy the disc or buy the merchandise, like Pokemon, they're not, I don't know if they're making any money at these video game convention thingies that they put on, but they're certainly making money by that's advertising for the games and for the cards and everything else. So
yeah, I think actually the issue was that in the whole dash that we've had up till now in all these streaming services, just trying to onboard as many subscribers as they can, that the prices were honestly way too low. That was, but we all got used to that. So now increasing the prices to where it can actually be profitable feels like it's much too expensive because we got used to the way low prices. So yeah, there'll be a balancing out. But yeah, it's just going to mean that people just are not going to be able to afford to subscribe to all of the streaming services every single month. There will have to be some picking and choosing, and then they're going to get tired of people canceling for 1 month and coming back another month, and we're going to end up with the lock-in contracts like cable TV had, because everything is merging back to what cable TV used to cost eventually, with the lock-in contracts and the prices that seem too high, and that's where it's all heading back to eventually.
Yeah. And I mean, I just think that that's inevitable. And I mean,
seems like
car washes around here are now subscriber based. You subscribe for a car wash, and now we went from there almost being no car washes around to them being literally across the street from each other.
Okay.
It's nuts. Comments, Dazz. First up,
we didn't hit the last.
I scrolled past it. Sorry. Via Will. This is from our listener Will. Masimo has named a new CEO, Kate Seisman. And Masimo's stock price has gone up as a result. Or Katie Seisman.
Yes.
I like that the Szyman, Seisman.
Yeah.
I like that last name. It's a neat spelling.
Yeah, this is not specifically about Masimo Consumer. It's not specifically about Sound United. But since we've just been following the whole saga of Sound United becoming part of Masimo, and then they ousted the founder and former CEO, Joe Chiani, a while back. So we're just following that saga. So this is the latest in that. Masimo has a new CEO. It's Katie Seisman. And we'll see what happens from there.
Amen. All right, let's see what happens. Comments from our listeners, Dazz. First up, did we forget about the HSU VTF TN1 subwoofer model? Last week we talked about not having enough space for a 15-inch sub in a rear corner. We suggested going with cylinder instead, since it's tall instead of having a big footprint. But that HSU TN1 is a 15-inch sub that's taller instead of being so deep and wide. So just a reminder. That's actually a good reminder, and thank you for reminding me of that.
That one there, though, actually
audio also has a lot of subs like that, but they're still
not a lot.
They still have a big footprint, but they also go up. But those are for really big rooms.
the TN1 still has a pretty sizable footprint. It's still larger than like a sealed SB3000 type of footprint, or the size of the footprint of the RSL Speedwoofer 10S Mark II that I also mentioned. So it's still a bigger footprint than those, whereas the cylinder subwoofers are about the same size. Like a lot of them are like a 15.5-inch cube, and then the cylinder sub is a 16-inch diameter. So those are pretty darn close in footprint, whereas the TN1, being a 15-inch driver in there, it's still like an 18-inch square footprint, which is not tiny. It's for a huge ported 15-inch sub, it's taller because a lot of those are like 2 feet deep and, 18 or 20 inches wide. So, I mean, it's smaller than that for sure, by basically turning what a lot of their depth of other models, making that the height instead, and then having like an 18-inch square footprint. But that's still considerably bigger than 15.5 inches square when you're talking about what floor space is available. So we didn't completely forget about it, although in the moment I will say I wasn't really mentioning it as an option there. But that's some of the justification, backwards working our way to justification.
Forgot about it. So thank you, Dazz, for that.
Okay. Yes, thank you either way, Dazz.
Next, from Dazz again, with some highly unusual snow days, like in Florida. Recently, Dazz encouraged us teenagers to invite their friends over for movies, gaming, and listening parties in Dazz's basement home theater. Dazz fed them barbecue, and he got their unfiltered feedback about audio, since he's been curious what this generation thinks about all of that. So it might be very informal and a small sample size, but this is what he gathered from his kids' friends. I don't know what teenagers means, though, because that's a very large. I mean, a couple of years, they're completely different people.
Sure.
Expensive headphones do carry some cachet, but they care most about battery life, and they really like having a transparency mode so they don't have to take their headphones off to talk. They do feel like a lot of marketing is just hype, though. All right. They really do like listening to music out loud on good speakers in a homey environment, but the layouts of most living rooms don't make it easy, and they figure that speakers that could easily hang on any walls, or be invisible mounted to in the walls would be best. So they're like my mom, except they don't like listen. My mom doesn't listen to music. Even as teenagers, they're already thinking about housing affordability and expecting that they won't be able to get a place large enough to really have space for big speakers. Headphones are their stopgap, and they aren't into sound bars. Hey, frickin' men. Who are raising these children? Because my children... I don't know what my children think about any of that. Gaming is a priority for sure, and they particularly like a theater-like system for cinematic games. Their words, not his. But they actually chose to sit in his second row of seats because the front row with his projection setup made the field of view too wide for gaming. That is 100% true.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the motion sickness becomes an issue if you're 50-degree field of view and you're whipping around in a first-person shooter. That's tough.
It is, and you have to really get used. Yes. So that is a very. If you do a lot of gaming and you're thinking about the size of your TV, you really need to think about, what usage is going to be primary for that. Because Clint had the same problem with his, when we used to game, with his screens, because his screens have always been too large for his space at first field of view. And he likes a big field of view, but he'd have to take, he's like, oh, we're going to game tonight? I'm like, yeah, I think so. He's like, all right, I'll go take some Dramamine. I'm like, okay. So they have heard of Atmos, they know what it is, but they want entry-level gear that fits their lifestyles and budgets. He hopes manufacturers start to notice and listen to the teens. You're going to listen to the adults, too, because everything's freaking expensive. Let's be honest.
The one thing that really stood out to me is like, hey, the teens are not into sound bars. I'm like, hey, good on you. Good on you, teenagers.
Yes, I agree with that. All right, we'll get into the questions here. I will say the second I think that Rob's going to pontificate, I'm going to go get some more coffee. I forgot my soda in the other room. So, Steve, my voice is cracking. I'm finally becoming a man. Steve says, rant time. It seems common to hear people saying that even if they think physical discs look and sound better than streaming, the convenience of streaming wins out. But Tom and Rob have said something to that effect at one time or another, right? Yes, I have.
Yep.
But do we find that watching a 4K Ultra Blu-ray disc is a more satisfying experience versus watching the same movie streamed in 4K? Steve has found himself starting to cancel his streaming subscription because the sheer amount of content is vast, but he's finding the Netflix and Amazon Prime and other streaming service originals to be really low quality in terms of plot and writing. And writers are cheap. Hire me. And while they may have A-list actors, he just isn't enjoying the movies themselves. I agree 100%. And I have other thoughts on that, but we'll go in a second. And then from service to service, interface is inconsistent, and the audio and video quality can be inconsistent. And he's thinking about how Sonos damaged their reputation by messing up their own user experience. So even the convenience factor doesn't overcome all of that. So is it maybe just better to stick with discs? They are consistent and dependable, and maybe wins out over the giant mess of content that's just thrown out there without much care from the streaming services. What do we think? The problem, I don't disagree with you almost in most of it, but the problem is I don't always want to watch a movie, and I don't always want to watch the same TV shows over and over again, and I want to sometimes experience what's new in the world without having to go buy an entire series via disc or rent something from the library, because we don't have any disc rental services anymore.
Yeah.
And the library stuff, I mean, who knows what quality that stuff's in. I just, in a perfect world, maybe I would own a Kaleidoscape, and I would, whenever I felt like seeing something, I would just download it and pay the money because I was infinitely rich, and it would be no problem.
You could rent it, right? If it's not one you're going to own to keep, you can rent it that way, get the high quality, sure.
But I just don't see that being a viable option for most people. I do think that, like Rob said before, we are going to see more. I mean, people are doing it already. People just switching services, canceling, picking one up, canceling, picking one up.
Keep one for a month and then hop over to a different one, cancel the first one.
And the problem I think that we're having with the quality of the streaming services is because they're just, like Rob said earlier, they're so desperate for content, original content, and that name recognition that a big actor or number of actors can bring with them, that they give those people just all the creative control. To a certain extent, and so you end up with these movies or TV shows that are, you can even look at the, what's his name? The Rebel Moon stuff and all of that, where people are just like, oh. Somebody needs to edit this thing a little bit. Somebody needs to be in the room to say, I don't know if that's such a good idea. So, there's, if you give these people who are not really auteurs, and even the ones that are, too much control, they end up doing things that satisfy them that aren't necessarily best for the project as a whole.
Yeah, an actual very good producer is a very valuable thing to have on a movie.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, for where Steve, is coming from here, like I don't see it as an either or. I don't see it as it's I'm a physical media fan or I'm a streaming fan. It's like, I'm a fan of both. And I mean, look, there is quite legitimately content that just isn't available on disc. And maybe I want to watch it or at least check it out. So I don't see it as an either or scenario. There's plenty of, like, if it's a movie that I really want to see in the very best quality, and if I don't have a Kaleidoscape, then I do want to get it on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray. Like for Oppenheimer, I want that movie on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray because look, it's streaming on Amazon Prime, or I can buy it through Apple Movies or Vudu or whatever. But it's like, well, then I don't get the changing aspect ratio, and I'm actually a fan of that. I like it when the IMAX portions expand and fill the entire 16:9 ratio of the screen, and only the 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray version of that does that at home. But then, just for the audio quality, for the video quality, there's unquestionably it's more data compressed when it's coming over streaming. So for those types of things, then that's the way I'm going to go for a movie like that. And I would absolutely say that I enjoy that experience more when it's done that way. But there are lots of movies and lots of shows that I have a passing interest in. I'd like to see it, but I don't particularly want to own it. I don't particularly care that much if I'm seeing it in the absolute best audio and video quality, as long as it's okay, as long as it's not distractingly bad. I'm perfectly fine with many, many movies seeing them that way. When I watched Sonic the Hedgehog, which honestly has very good production value, both audio and video, but like I kind of just wanted something light and breezy to watch last week, and I wasn't intending to own that movie, and I'm totally fine watching that on Paramount Plus in the quality that it came across. So yeah, that to me, that's why it's not an either or scenario. Yeah, I think that's about it as far as that goes. As far as the content itself, like the quality of the writing or the production of it or whatever, first of all, I actually think the production quality has not been a problem. Like if you look at the Netflix originals, the Amazon Prime originals, the Paramount Plus originals, that like the actual production quality on the technical side of things, that really is not bad at all. So if you're then saying, okay, it's really the writing, it's the plots, it's that type of thing, I think we might actually end up pining for the days that we have right now, because there was this huge amount of content that, I mean, it was a lot of just throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. But we've come to the end of that now. We're now into the era that was like after the pandemic, after the strikes, we're now and all of these streaming services realizing that it wasn't profitable, so they have really constricted on what they've been greenlighting. We're gonna have a small amount of content, relatively speaking, coming out. Everyone's been talking about how 2025 is sort of like the final year where the big glut of content is all coming out this year. And then 2026 and beyond, there's going to be a lot less original content showing up on the streaming services. But they're also getting pickier about what they do greenlight, and they are pulling back on the budgets, and they're exerting more oversight over the people making these things. So yeah, it's all a give and take. The pendulum always swings back and forth, but it could be in 2 years from now, Steve is going to write back and be like, where's all the original content? It's like, because it's a delay following on.
If you
Production takes time.
I think if you look at Disney and you see how they put out original content, and I mean, as far as like, and of course they put out a lot more original content than I actually watch. I see the Star Wars stuff and I see the Marvel stuff. I'm not watching almost anything else on there. I have seen a couple of Nat Geo things or whatever. Okay. But that amount of original content, I think, is, first of all, overall, no matter what you think about any individual show, the production values, for the most part, have been very, very high. Yeah. I think even with some exceptions, you may not like a show, but it's because it doesn't suit you or you disagree with it because of political reasons, or you're an incel or something. But I mean,
the few production exceptions on the production quality side is like, that's not new to streaming. We had plenty of movies and TV shows before streaming ever existed where some of them you're like, what happened there? Where did the money go? So that's not new.
Mortal Kombat 2, anybody? Where you're like, that's Xena Warrior Princess levels of CGI.
I don't know. That's kind of an insult to Xena Warrior Princess. I think that... At least Xena Warrior Princess was consistent.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, that was a movie, and Xena was better.
It was.
But yeah, there's always been that. But I think it's not like there's a new show coming out every week from Disney. At least not.
Well, not every week. Every month or so, though. It's getting pretty close. Yeah.
So I think that. They're never been like at the very highest of volumes. So, I think that we're going to see a little bit of contraction from them, but they've been very consistent for like, I've been very happy with my Disney Plus, even though I don't watch it that much. When I do, I'm always like, this was totally worth it. All right. New for this week. I guess I don't know why I read that, but I did because it was on there and then I read it. Matt in the UK. Matt was using a 5.1.2 configuration with front height speakers since his old receiver topped out at 7 speakers max. He bought a pair of Cambridge Audio Minx Min 12. Wow. That's a lot of words in a row. Cambridge Audio Minx Min 12 cube-shaped speakers and mounted them on the ceiling basically directly overhead. Since his seats are close to the back wall, he unplugged his front height speakers and tried out the new overhead speakers as top mills instead and decided to keep them. So then he accelerated his upgrade plans a bit and went ahead and bought himself a Denon X3800H receiver. Comparing his speakers' physical locations to the diagrams in the manual, he settled on labeling his 4 overhead speakers as front heights and surround heights. But was that his best choice? Should he maybe label his 4 overhead speakers in a different way? So there's some...
I say yes.
Yeah, were front heights and some were top middles is what he had, right? And now,
but he labeled them as surround heights. Just looking at the diagrams, looking at where it showed the angles and stuff like that. He's like, these actually, by the diagrams, are closest to being front heights and surround heights. And he labeled them as such. So yeah,
What is surround heights?
Well, that was from Oro 3D, right? That was the elevation speakers that are directly above where your surround speakers are.
But if you label them that way, do they not get used for Atmos anymore? Because
that's the thing. So it was kind of weird because back in the 700 series, so like the 6700, 4700, 3700, back then, Denon actually released an update at one point that allowed you to use surround height speakers with Atmos and allowed you to use top middle speakers as the voice of God speaker in Oro. That happened during the 700 series. But I've been looking through the manuals, and in the 800 series, that seems to be gone. They mention how if you label them as surround heights, they don't get used by Atmos, which was the case before the 700 series and appears to now be the case after the 700 series. And for some reason, the 700 series in the middle let you do that, but then they got away from that for some reason or other. So with an X3800H, you don't really want to label them as surround heights unless Oro is the only thing you're using, although surround heights can be used by DTS-X as well.
Okay.
But for Atmos, and since most of our immersive audio content is going to be in Dolby Atmos, surround heights probably aren't the best label. Overall, kind of regardless, if you have 4 overhead speakers and a pair of them is somewhere vaguely in front of you and another pair is somewhere vaguely behind you, even if it's kind of basically directly overhead, you just have that front to back separation. My recommendation is to label them as front heights and rear heights, regardless. For one thing, labeling them as front heights and rear heights is for sure the most compatible labels for all 3 immersive audio formats. So whether you want to listen in Dolby Atmos, DTS-X, their upmixers, Dolby Surround, or DTS Neural X, or in Oro 3D, or the Oro upmixer, the Oro-matic upmixer, regardless of any of those that you might want to use, front heights and rear heights as labels are compatible with all 3. You will get 4-quadrant sound. You will get use out of all 4 of those overhead speakers from all the immersive audio formats and their upmixers if they are labeled as front heights and rear heights. So that's one reason. The other reason is DTS-X and DTS Neural X specifically really want you to use front heights and rear heights. If you don't, if you label them as top fronts and top rears instead, or front heights and top middles, or top middles only, whatever it is, anything other than front heights and rear heights with DTS-X, it tries to do a vertical stereo location thingy. Right. So let's say I labeled them as top fronts. It tries to use a combination of the top fronts and front main speakers to stereo locate those sounds at the front height positions, and we just don't stereo locate vertically because our ears are side to side and not up and down. That's the short and long of it.
Unless you're lying down on the couch.
Yeah.
Then it works.
So when they're labeled as front heights and rear heights, if you're listening to Dolby Atmos, it doesn't really make much of a distinction in the steering between whether they were labeled as top fronts and top rears versus front heights and rear heights. It's just kind of like, yeah, this sound is in front and above and to the left, behind and to the right and above. Like it kind of does the 4-quadrant steering, and it doesn't make much difference there with Dolby. So front heights, rear heights works great. For DTS-X, you're getting the actual discrete sounds between bottom layer and top layer rather than it trying to blend them and stereo locate in a way that doesn't work very well for the height positions anyway. And then for Oro, they're like, yeah, ideally it would be front heights and surround heights for Oro, but they're like, rear heights is fine. We'll use those in place of surround heights. It's not that big a deal in Oro, so it's compatible with everything. It's compatible with all the mixers, and you get the most discrete steering of sound across all 3 immersive audio formats. So even though it doesn't line up with the diagrams, label them front heights and rear heights.
Secondly, he says, just as an FYI, he was eager to try all 3 immersive audio formats, Atmos, DTS-X, and Oro 3D, but at first the Denon wouldn't let him change his listening mode when he was using his Amazon Fire TV stick as a source device. Turned out he had the audio output of his Fire TV stick set to best option, which was strictly outputting an Atmos signal that the Denon refused to decode into any other way, which is kind of how that works, unfortunately. He manually set the Fire TV stick to output Dolby Digital Plus, and he was able to select any listening mode that he wanted in the Denon. I wonder how he felt about the different ones with it set in that way.
Yeah, so I mean, the thing is, now what you're doing is 3 different up mixers.
Yeah.
Because if you're having your source device output Dolby Digital Plus, then that's going to be a 5.1 or a 7.1 Dolby Digital Plus signal, and now you're applying the Dolby Surround upmixer or the DTS Neural X upmixer or the Oromatic upmixer. So that's really what you were comparing in that scenario. You weren't comparing the discrete decoding of Atmos or DTS-X or Oro 3D.
You have to change that the source. So if you had a disc that had DTS-X, Dolby Atmos, and Oro 3D, which I don't think exists, but if there were a disc like that, you could, in theory, change between the three of them.
But I don't have any problem with someone experimenting with the upmixers. Sure. I mean, that's fun. Why not do it? Yeah, and sometimes people are like, well, that's not the way it is with discs. With a disc, I can have a Dolby Atmos soundtrack, but I can still choose to play that back using the DTS Neural Upmixer applied to it instead. And that's because on the disc, they really do have a bed layer, a base layer. Bed layer is the wrong thing to do because that's object-oriented, but like a base layer format, which in the case of Dolby Atmos on a disc will be Dolby True HD. There is a Dolby True HD 5.1 or 7.1 soundtrack, and then there is an additional layer of metadata on that makes it into Dolby Atmos. So if you have a Dolby Atmos decoder, it'll be Dolby Atmos, but then you also have the option of being like, no, instead apply the Dolby or the DTS Neural X upmixer or the Oromatic upmixer, and now it'll say Dolby True HD plus Neural X or Dolby True HD plus Oromatic. That's what'll happen there. So that works on the discs, but on the streamers, the Dolby Atmos it's actually coming
Still
across.
Not a fair comparison though, because if you were to do Dolby Atmos, you would be getting discrete Dolby Atmos in that case, and then upmixing with the other two. So you'd have to remember that when you were doing your comparisons. Not that I think that it would make a huge amount of difference, but it is still a slightly unfair comparison.
But let's see. Disney Plus, that's the only streaming service right now that is actually sending out DTS-X as an option on their IMAX enhanced titles.
Right.
You can have DTS-X from Disney Plus, but no other streamers are using DTS. There are no streamers doing Oro. So if you did just set your Fire TV stick to best option, it's going to be Atmos. That's what it's going to be. You won't have the option of choosing other mixers to apply to it, but that's probably still ultimately the best place to land.
Joe says he really appreciates the way we explain things and feels he's learned a lot from us in a relatively short amount of time. He probably leans a bit more towards the audio side than the video side of things, and he says we filled in some holes in his understanding, but he was wondering, if someone wants a complete, from the ground up, linear education in home audio, is there a resource we would point to? He's sure if someone were to somehow go through our entire catalog of back episodes and edit together clips from podcasts over the years, it's all there, but that seems like an overwhelming task, which is why we don't do it.
I ain't doing that. That is an overwhelming task.
So where would we point to a beginner who maybe doesn't even know what to ask? I would go to avgadgets.com and start reading, because that's where I obviously am speaking from a place of trying to self-promote here a little bit. But AV Gadgets, when I started writing on that website, I really did start from the ground up. Okay. I did not, I needed to have articles to reference when I was talking about things in other articles. So I would start an article and I would be like, oh, well, okay. And then, you want to make sure that you're using, the correct size speaker wire, or you want speaker wire. And then I was like, oh, I don't have an article on speaker wire. So I'd either have to go back and find one that I had already written, or I'd have to write one. So I kept basically doing that back and forth. Excuse me. I need something to drink. But I kept doing that back and forth until I came up with, essentially a catalog of everything. So the problem is that Google, which is great, in general at finding things on the web, when you integrate it into your website, it becomes as dysfunctional as almost any family gathering of a large family during the holidays. It is just a bunch. It doesn't give you what you want. I can't find anything on my website. If you're looking for something, a specific topic, go to Google itself, type in AV Gadgets until it tells you that you're going to search the site,
Okay.
You know what I mean? So you put avgadgets.com, hit space, and it'll like give you the little website. Like within AV Gadgets, search for this. That's the best way.
Okay.
You will be almost find anything we talk about here, because if Rob and I talk about it and I'm like, oh, that was interesting, I'm going to write an article about it. Or sometimes I'll go, Rob, I'm going to steal the text that you made me read on this podcast, and I'm going to turn it into an article. And Rob says, stop talking to me. I'm busy.
I have never put it that way. That is never been the way it's gone.
All right, now you can talk. I'm going to get something to drink before I choke.
I am, yeah. And the other thing you can do over at AV Gadgets actually is it is still formatted in a blog style format. So you could just page your way all the way back to the beginning and kind of read it from oldest to newest, and you kind of go through it that way. That's the sort of more linear structure that you were looking for. But I have a bunch of links here that I'm going to point you to. These links will be in the show notes. So that is where you can find the links to all of these. Some of these do have a cost associated to them. Some of them are free. But I'm going to go through some resources that I think might be very handy to you. So I'm going to start with what is colloquially known as the home theater book. It is an online resource, and it costs $49. They have a sale going right now, if you're seeing the image for the sale price there. But yeah, $49 is the regular price. Not too bad. The official name for it is actually Ultimate Guide to Designing and Building Your Dream Home Theater. So that's the official name for it there. But it is a very good resource. Am I going to agree with 100% of every single word that is in there? Perhaps not. But I mean, on balance, it is much, much more I'm in agreement than any tiny little nitpicks that I might have. So yeah, given that it is the original part of it is sort of written like a book structure, but then there are lots of supplemental and additional resources that come along with it for that $49 price. I do think that might be a very, very good starting point for you if you're willing to pay that little bit of money. It's not exorbitant or anything like that. So I think that's largely what you're looking for there. Now, for free, over from Cedia, they do have their RP22 document, their recommended practices. This is all about immersive audio design. And it's not exactly like a book or even a glossary or that, but going through RP22, once you have that sort of knowledge that you've gained from the home theater book, it's really going to get you right up to date with the most recent recommended practices for what you might put into a home theater that you're building. It's a fantastic resource, and even better, it's free. You do have to sign up for Cedia. You have to put in your name and your address information, that type of thing, but there's no actual cost associated to it. So yeah, there's no reason not to download RP22 for free and have a look through that, because there's no financial cost to it. Now, there are a bunch of books, largely from the Audio Engineering Society, that Amazon has very nicely collected into the Audio Engineering Society Presents series of books. They have 29 titles in there. Now, a ton of these are on the production side of things. And if you're just looking for a consumer audio as a listener, then a lot of these are not going to apply. If you want to buy all of them, it's like $1,700 for all 29 of these books. That's probably
you
not
could buy a bike for that.
Sure, probably not what you're really looking to do.
One very expensive repair.
But the point is, I'll have the link to the entire collection so you can peruse the collection and see if there's some particular titles in there that you really want to pick out and select. Now, I'm going to highlight a couple of them that I think are well worth your time. If you really want an education in audio that is applicable to the consumer side of things, the first one I'm going to start with is the Handbook for Sound Engineers. Now, this is basically a textbook, okay? So this is not going to be light reading or anything like that. But if you really want to understand how audio works on the how it's made, how it's played back, the Handbook for Sound Engineers is kind of an indispensable guide that you might want to read. Now, it is not cheap. It's like around $200 because, like I say, it's basically a textbook. But if you really want an education on how the electronics of sound engineering works, then this is the handbook for that. Now, the one that I really think you pretty much have to get if you want an education is Dr. Floyd Toole's Sound Reproduction, the Acoustics and Psychoacoustics of Loudspeakers and Rooms. I mean, this is the, if you want as close to a Bible in terms of understanding how audio works, like this is it. It's Dr. Floyd Toole, very, very famous, and this is the book, and it's about $65 over there on Amazon. So it's not crazy amount of money to spend on getting what is absolutely the the epitome of an education in audio is Dr. Floyd Toole's sound reproductions. That's an indispensable one. Another one I really like, if you want to understand speakers, Vance Dickinson's Loudspeaker Design Cookbook. If you want to understand how speakers actually work, what are voice coils? What are crossovers? How do you design a crossover? What's going into crossover design? How do I choose where that frequency is? What the slopes are? Like, this is how to make a loudspeaker. If you want to understand that, this is an easy one to point to. Now, this is going for $130 on Amazon, not the cheapest thing. There, you will notice there's a volume 1 and a volume 2. Volume 2 was basically a lot of the older information from previous ones that he didn't want to toss that out because it's still good reference material, but it's not the latest that you really need to know. So volume 1 is really all you need, but it is about $130. Now, some free resources I just want to toss out to you. If you want to know everything there is to do with building a soundproof room, head on over to soundproofingcompany.com, and they have an entire soundproofing 101 section. And just work your way through those links. It's free. There's no reason not to look at it, and you will have a better understanding of what actually works in terms of soundproofing of real rooms, right? Small rooms that you would actually build in a residential house. We're not talking auditoriums and stadiums type of stuff. This is real applicable to your house soundproofing, and there's probably no better guide than Soundproofing 101, and it's free. If you want to understand how cables work, Blue Jeans Cable has a whole series of articles. You will never learn more about how cables actually work than from what Blue Jeans Cable has written up here.
It's dense, though. It does not hold your hand.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's one thing you'll have to know about reading the Blue Jeans stuff.
That's right.
In fact, that's probably true of everything Rob's recommending. I will say that some of these books in this group here, Audio Engineering Society Presents, like there's one that's called that I think sounds interesting, which is the where is it? Audio Production and Critical Listening, Technical Ear Training or whatever. Sounds very interesting. The hardcover is $140, so good luck with that. But right underneath it in the list here, for a mere $275, Concrete Solutions, Proceedings of Concrete Solutions, 6th International Conference on Concrete Repair.
Okay.
Why is that in this group of books?
Well, because if you're building a mastering studio, then you're going to be worried about concrete construction, I guess.
It's all about repairing concrete, I guess. It's a very strange thing to see. And like the book right after it is another audio book. It's
sure.
Recording studio design, then sound reproduction, then immersive sound, and then hack audio, and then loudspeakers, and then all this other stuff. But just this one concrete book's in here. They just snuck it in there.
It was in there from the Audio Engineering Society, then they're going to include it. So
it's funny.
But going back to the final handful of free resources that I just wanted to point out there. If you want to learn all about acoustic treatments, both diffusion and bass trapping and absorption and all the applications, GIC Acoustics has a fantastic education section on their website. Work your way through the education section of GIC Acoustics and you're going to have a fantastic understanding of room treatments and acoustic treatments and all the various types and how to best use them and deploy them. And then finally, I am very impressed by what audioadvice.com has on their website. Now, they are a retailer, but they've included this home theater designer, like 3-dimensional software that is really, really good for visualizing how you're going to lay everything out, and they offer it for free, so why not have a look at it? But beyond their home theater designer, they have a bunch of buying guides, which, yes, it is sort of retail-centered, because they are a retailer, that's how they make their money, but they have good information in their guides to all these various topics that, on top of all the other resources that we've given to you, I don't mind pointing you one bit, because it's very nice to have more input on all these various sections, including I like a lot of their design stuff. A lot of their design stuff I think is really handy and easily digestible there. So I can't imagine that isn't enough resources to at least get you a start on something you might not have checked out before. And that's where you would go.
I will say that many of the websites that Rob has linked and referenced you to, I have used in order to write my articles.
Sure. Over at 80 Gadgets,
Yeah, so, I try to make it a little bit more accessible to people. Sure. Hopefully that works for you. If not, they're not going to hurt my feelings. Go wherever makes the most sense to you.
Were to read and retain all of the links that I just mentioned, you'll know more than I do.
That's true.
Because I cannot retain all of that information. It's a lot of information I just gave out there.
So he asks, and I forgot who we were with here. Who are we with? We are Joe. Joe asks, how dense does a material need to be in order for sound waves to reflect off of it rather than be absorbed by it? Remember, sound waves have different levels of energy depending on their frequency. So a very high frequency, which might be too high for you to hear, will reflect off of all the materials that you would use to absorb stuff inside your home theater, and then other stuff like that would absorb certain low frequencies are still going to reflect sounds that are well within your hearing range. So this happens a lot with when we talk about covering your acoustic panels. We're worried about whether or not it passes the breath test, whether or not you can breathe through it, because you want to make sure that the air can pass through it, because if not, then it's going to start reflecting some of those high frequencies. And maybe some of those frequencies that you think aren't really all that high, it's still going to reflect them. So depending on the opacity, is that right? Opacity of the
well, that's just it. I wanted to make the clarification that it's not really about the density of the material. Because, I mean, you could take a piece of saran wrap, which is not very dense, but it is going to reflect almost all the sound waves that hit it and not absorb any of them, other than maybe if you stretch it just right and it kind of works like a membrane.
It's going to be like a drum. Yeah.
It's going to resonate at certain ones, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, like, it's not the density of the material. It's how are sound waves able to pass through it, but then also interact with it so that kinetic energy, because that's what sound is kinetic energy, gets turned into heat. That's how absorbers work, is that it's converting kinetic energy into heat. Right. That's what makes it an absorber. So yeah, it's not the density that matters. It's whether or not the sound waves in air, because that's what we're talking about, in air, can penetrate and then interact with, like, whether it's little fibers or little threads or whatever it is, so that it causes those things to move and generate heat and convert that energy. That's what it's really about, not the density.
Yeah. So let's say you're building a home theater with an unfinished basement with the ceiling joist exposed. He's assuming it would be a good idea to fill the joist space with insulation, but once you put a layer of drywall on the ceiling, do most of the sound waves, particularly the bass, now reflect off the drywall, or do they penetrate and get absorbed by the insulation?
They reflect.
Does it make sense to put up drywall and then put insulation-based panels on the ceiling as well? As in, now there's insulation on both sides of the drywall.
Yes.
I mean, yes. So the insulation in the bays is doing a different job.
That's right.
And then so remember, the absorbers in the room are not to keep sound from getting out, but keeping it's to reduce the reflections of the sounds within the room. But sounds are still going to get out. The sounds, the insulation of the walls will increase the density. It's essentially increase the density and help absorb a little bit of that. But that's not the primary way that sound gets out of your room. So, if you're trying to make your room sound better, you put the panels in the room. If you're trying to keep the sound in the room, then you change the walls and everything else.
Yeah, there's two different topics. Yeah, he's asking. Do you want to say the last part there?
Yes. So what if you simply left the ceiling open and didn't put any drywall on the ceiling at all? Can sound still be kept from bothering the upstairs level?
No.
So there's three things happening now.
Yeah.
So we've actually had somebody do this before in a garage, I believe. They converted their garage and they left the joists open and they shoved some insulation in there, and they're like, will this work? And then the answer is yes, it will work. Of course it will, because the insulation is in the room with you, therefore it is absorbing the reflections.
As far as addressing the acoustics of the sound system inside the garage.
That's right.
But there is nobody upstairs to bother above the garage, and sound will be escaping out of the ceiling of that garage, but it's just going outside, so we weren't really too worried about it. Yeah, these are two different topics, soundproofing or sound isolation versus acoustic treatment, how it sounds inside the room. Those are two quite separate things.
And while you can use some of the same materials for both to address both things. Like, you want to put insulation in your walls, right? Yeah. To keep to reduce the sound transmission out.
It's actually,
but that is
what's going on when it's inside your walls or inside your ceiling, like there's a floor and then there's joists and then there's a drywall ceiling, and having insulation in there in that cavity, that is actually about sound waves from above or below, right? Someone walking upstairs on that floor, or someone playing the home theater in the basement home theater. Sound waves are going to vibrate those big flat areas, right? The person walking on the floor, it's physically vibrating that. The sound inside the theater, it's physically vibrating the drywall. And so that means that some of that sound is getting into that cavity in between the floor and the ceiling drywall. And so what the insulation in there, what that is doing is acting as a disruptor to, instead of like that cavity, it's going to resonate, right? That sound that made it down through the floor or up through the ceiling drywall is going to resonate inside of that hollow cavity. And we put the insulation in there to disrupt that that resonance, to make sure that we don't turn it into a nice resonating tube for certain frequencies of sound. That's what that insulation is for. The insulation that is attached to the drywall ceiling inside the theater, it's not about stopping sound from getting upstairs. It doesn't really do a terribly good job of that.
It doesn't do a good job of that.
But it's about reducing the reflections inside the room. Inside your room, there's going to be reflecting sound.
Now, notice we said
reverberation,
reduce, not
eliminate.
Not eliminate.
Yeah.
So sound will still pass through the insulation, hit the wall behind, and then come back through again and still go back into the room. It'll just be reduced in volume and overall energy levels.
Because some of it got converted to heat.
So that you're not hearing the reflections, because now there's more sound, more direct sound happening that's so much louder that it no longer is bothering you, or by the time it gets to you, it's reduced to a level that's basically inaudible. That's in theory where we should go. But it's very easy to get soundproofing and room treating conflated.
Absolutely.
It's very easy because
it happens all the time.
People are like, I want to reduce. I want to reduce the amount of sound in my room so that it sounds better. You think, okay, well, if I do that, then there'll be less sound to get out. That's kind of not how that works.
It's the physical vibrations that go from room to room, and that's still going to happen. So, two different things: soundproofing versus acoustic treatment.
Check out the soundproofing company, because they will really. That sounds like where you should start, because you were asking about all the links. So that sounds like where you should start. David's trying to help a friend with the sound system, but there are many hurdles to overcome. At the moment, David's friend is just using the speakers that are built into his 85-inch LG LCD TV. Well, he already messed up by buying an LCD LG instead of just another light, like he should have, but whatever. It's a wide open, great room. He is already prepared for the fact that he won't be achieving full pressurized bass or 20 hertz extension. It's so funny that people say that. I'm like, you don't have to tell us that you're not going to do it, because we're not going to tell you to do it.
No, it's just he's accepted it. He's accepted that that's not going to happen.
Well, good. He's accepted that he's barely getting sound out of his TV, so whatever. He'll be perfectly happy with just half-decent extension, said absolutely everybody that didn't mean it. Furthermore, the TV is set up in a central location in the wide open space. The closest wall is 12 feet away, and they don't want to see any wires, and aesthetics are a big concern. Well, you're going to see wires. I hate to say it.
Something.
You're going to see something. On top of all this, David's friend doesn't want to spend more than $1,200, although the budget goes high to $1,600 if that would make a big difference. And on top of everything else, his friends wants both Dolby Atmos and DTS-X to be supported as well. David was mainly considering a soundbar solution that would include at least one wireless subwoofer plus wireless surround speakers that would get mounted on the back wall that is 12 feet behind the seats. And he's looking at the options from Nakamichi, JBL, Samsung, and Sonos. I don't think any of those, Nakamichi, I don't think fits the $1,200 budget, but let's just go on. Yeah. But isn't sure if any of those are actually the right choice, or if his friend should be getting something else entirely, maybe Sony's HT-A9 or Bravia's quad system. Can we help out? Okay.
So a bunch of these things are over the budget. That eliminates a ton of these if that budget is strict. Yeah.
Yes, because if your budget is strict, Nakamichi doesn't. I know for sure.
Well, there is a Nakamichi that comes the closest. We're going to use some of that wiggle room, and it's going to have to get it on sale, but there is one option.
So, okay.
I know.
A lot of times people, when they come, they know just enough about what they, the topic of which they speak, to know some of the buzzwords and to know some of the things that everybody says they should want, and they also know what the real expensive thing. So imagine if you went into a car dealership and you said, I would like to buy a car, but I don't want a Lamborghini. I can't afford that. Everybody's like looking around like, we don't even sell Lamborghinis here. I don't know what you're talking about, because they know Lamborghinis are expensive and they're fast, and they're fine with a car that just kind of works. They're just driving to work, right? Is what they'll say. But then you'll put them in a car that's kind of a junker, and it will get you 10 miles down the road and back, but then you'll have to, recharge the battery or something. They're like, well, this thing's a piece of junk. And we're like, yeah, that's what you said you wanted. You said you didn't want a Lamborghini and you wanted something that would just barely work. This is it. Well, no, I want something nicer than that. That's kind of where we're at here. He knows that certain things are really expensive, and that is 20 hertz extension, full pressurization. He knows that's very expensive, and he knows he doesn't want to afford that. Yeah. But he also knows that Atmos and DTS-X are really important, because that's what all the people say about online. That's really important, and he must have it. Okay, he must have it. But he also knows that he's got this number in his head, $1,200, which to him is enough money to do anything that could ever want to be done in home theater audio, and anything above that is just wasting money. Okay, because these are just the amount of, this is just the knowledge that he has, and I don't really blame anybody for this. I want you to understand that people, when you're shopping for something that's brand new to you, you try to educate yourself as best you can, and the first thing you read or the first thing you see is the thing that kind of sticks in your mind. So Atmos and DTS-X are two things that are out in almost every single article. They're talking about them constantly. So it must be good, and it must be new, and it must be important. Therefore, I should probably have it. But you also know that it's really easy to spend way too much money in home theater if you're not careful. So you better set a really strict budget just in case. And let people know that you're not going to be one of those suckers. Okay, but then you also don't want a piece of junk. Okay, so you don't know what you want. Right? Yeah. You don't know what you want. You just know that you don't want to get taken advantage of, and you don't want, and you want to make sure that you're getting something good. Okay, and that's where the DTS-X and the Atmos comments come from. So let me reassure your friend this. First of all, you can get something good. You can, now getting something good at this price point without wires is like it. I mean, if you have a genie and a lamp, ask them, because there's nothing wireless, truly wireless, where there's no wires anywhere. So you're gonna have to plug something in. Yes. You gotta plug something in, right? So that's a non-starter. You just have to get over the fact that there's not going to be any wires. You have to figure out how you're going to hide the wires. That we can help you with, but there are going to be wires, and frankly, the more wires they are, the closer to your budget we can get. Essentially, is what it comes down to. Yeah. Because the more wireless stuff that you add in here, the more complexity, which I'm sure he doesn't want complexity, and the more cost there is, because now you have individual amplifiers all over the place instead of one centralized amplifier like in the AV receiver. What this guy really needs is a very simple 5-point system. Obviously,
that, because I was going to say, I mean, honestly, what he needs is a really good pair of self-powered speakers that can handle this. Like
those KEF towers. I mean, they're not going to hit $1,200.
That's way too expensive. But I was thinking,
I'm saying like that. The Fluence has towers too.
They do, yeah. But I was going to suggest, like for this kind of room size, this wide open, Klipsch's the 9s might be a good option here. Now, these are just a pair of self-powered, horn-loaded, large 8-inch driver, large bookshelf speakers, but they have the sort of output capability. They're between 1,200 and 1,600. They're not 1,200, but they're between there. They have the option of adding a subwoofer to them. They have a subwoofer out jack if you want to. But of course, it's not going to do Atmos or DTS-X, being that it is a pair of self-powered speakers. But if you want the cleanliness, no wires, has an HDMI ARC port, all those types of things, then Klipsch's the 9s would be something that could work well there. Or like Tom says, the Fluence towers, if they want tower speakers.
The AI again, these were named before AI was a thing. 81 Elite powered towers. They're like $500 a pair. They're cheap. Okay. You can still get a subwoofer with them.
That's right. Yeah, but those would be probably the solutions I would personally want to look at most. But look, let's say that's all off the table. It has to be a soundbar solution. That's what's in mind. Nakamichi, one of their Shockwave models, the Ultra 924 SSE Max, which was the former highest end in the Shockwave series before the brand new Shockwave Wireless was announced. But the Shockwave Wireless is $2,500, so that's going to be well over the budget. You can find the Ultra 924 SSE Max on sale over at B&H Photo right now for $1,400. So, I mean, that's, again, between the $1,200 and $1,600. Normally, it's $1,800 or $1,900, but on sale, it's $1,400 right now at B&H Photo. The thing is here, it's a wireless connection from the large, quite loud, output-capable soundbar that would sit under the TV. Wireless connection from there to the two 10-inch subwoofers that come with it. But then the surround speakers have wires that go from the subwoofers to the surround speakers. So you're going to probably end up with both of those subwoofers on the back wall, which I don't know if that's going to be the best results, but that would kind of be the only way to do it. But that might be the one that you had in mind. The other one I would point you to is Sennheiser's Ambio soundbars. Now, to fit the budget, it would be the Soundbar Plus. They have a Soundbar Max, I think it is, but that's well over the budget. The Ambio Soundbar Plus goes for $1,600. It's right up at the top of the budget there. But this is all of the Atmos and DTS-X drivers just built into the very large Sennheiser soundbar that sits below the TV. There's no additional speakers other than the single wireless subwoofer that does come with it. But I think that's closer to what your friend is really looking for. It's going to light up the DTS-X and the Dolby Atmos logos. It's going to let them light up those logos. It's going to give you the pseudo surround effect. There are a gazillion drivers pointed in all kind of different directions. The Sennheiser Ambio soundbars can play loud. They're clear. They sound good, but it's a simple, as close to wireless setup as you can get, as clean as you can get for a centrally located TV in a room where all the walls are far away from it. I actually think the Sennheiser Ambio might be the best solution if something like the size of Klipsch's the 9s are just out of the question. Because they might be, right? They are big, stand-mounted bookshelf speakers, and they might just not want the look. If they want something that's closer to the look of a soundbar, the Sennheiser Ambio Plus might be the way to go.
Yeah, what's this? Here we go. Sorry, they changed their interface. So I know that Atmos and DTS-X and stuff is all the rage right now, but the amount of, if you want good sound, it's so much easier to get good stereo sound without, quote unquote, without wires. Yeah. Because it's just going to be right on either side of your TV, basically. Than you will get with any of these soundbar solutions. So the soundbar solution will allow you to say, I've got Atmos.
Yep.
But it's not going to sound as good as stereo. I'm sorry. It's just in this situation, it's not. Nothing's going to be reflecting off the ceiling because this place is probably humongous and probably vaulted. But who knows?
I will take a Sennheiser Ambio soundbar over the built-in TV speakers. I will absolutely take that. So,
but I think that you would actually be better off just with a regular old soundbar, not trying to do the Atmos stuff in the DTS or whatever.
You still need to be able to play for the size of this room, and there aren't many that can. So
yeah, it's very hard. I would just look at the Klipsch, the Fluence, or almost any other, high-powered, self-powered if you can. But even without that, you could still, for $1,200, you can probably get yourself, some decently high-powered bookshelf speakers, and but whatever. Let us know what you end up doing. I'm sure it's going to be a soundbar. Justin says he's a new listener. He's coming to us right out of the gate with quite the challenge. So he's a custom integrator by trade, but more on the networking and lighting and smart home side of things. He fully admits he is not a home or audio theater specialist, and that's why he's coming to ask us for some advice. He's working on a project that includes a 5.2.4 Atmos speaker configuration in the Great Room, but when we say Great Room in this case, it is substantially bigger and a more challenging acoustic environment than you might think at first. So check out the Flickr album because you're going to want to see this because it's stupid. It's stupid how big this place is. And I mean that in the most complimentary of senses. So it's on YouTube. It's got the Flickr album.
Yeah.
It's if you can't see those for wherever you're in the car or whatever, it's just think about the inside of a ski lodge, because that's what this thing looks like.
That's the first thing I thought of. I'm like, that looks like the inside of a ski lodge. I mean, it might not be, but just picture that if you can't see the images for some reason. That's sort of what we're
stories, huge, A-frame vault in the middle of this thing with a spiral staircase going up the back or front, I don't know, wall.
Sure.
Wood paneling everywhere. Let me read this.
That's just what I said. Exposed beams. Yeah.
Yeah, exposed beams. There's nothing soft. There's multiple stories. There's balconies everywhere. And on top of the massive open untreated room size, there seems to have been an attempt to keep the price of the sound system on the lower end of things. The front 3 speakers, so there's already something installed here. Okay. And there's, of course, there's a gigantic floor-to-ceiling windows on one side, because why wouldn't there be? The front 3 speakers are Sonic's Invisible series in-wall speakers with a light layer of plaster over them as intended by their design to make them completely invisible. And they're the 8-inch woofer versions, which are spec'd at 6 ohms nominal, 86 dB sensitivity. You need just a ginormous monoblock for these things, but they can only handle 160 watts of power. Yeah. They're a fully sealed and enclosed design. They've currently been set to large because, of course, they have. 2 10-inch Sonic's Invisible series subwoofers are also installed in the front wall. He's used them in other installations before, and they've gone into protection mode.
Yeah.
They're dying.
I can't say I'm surprised in this room size.
There's a pair of Sonic speakers.
Surround speakers. Yeah.
Surround speakers. I'm sorry. There are a pair of surround speakers and 4 overhead speakers for Atmos. They're all Gallo Diva SE orb-shaped speakers that use a single 3-inch diameter driver, no separate tweeter, and they're spec'd at 4 ohms nominal with 88 dB sensitivity, with 125 watts of power handling if deployed them as small, which they probably aren't, with a 100 hertz crossover, which has been done. Oh, good. Yeah. But they're only spec'd to handle 60 watts if they run without a crossover. So they were chosen for their looks, which all of this was, and because they're available as a pendant version that can hang from the exposed rafters without ruining the aesthetics of the room. The entire 5.2.4 system is being powered solely by a Pioneer Elite. I'm surprised that hasn't gone into protection mode. LX505 AV receiver, and after initial installation and check, just to make sure everything is functioning, the only listening mode that sounded remotely satisfying was the all-channel stereo mode. And the other listening mode sounded inadequate, which makes sense because not a single one of these speakers can project enough sound. So Justin's direct question to us is, how can he protect this speaker setup from damaging itself? He was able to set a limit on the maximum volume setting on the Pioneer receiver, and he was able to set the receiver for 4 ohm impedance rather than the default 8 ohm setting, which is probably one of the only things that's keeping this thing from self-imploding. As mentioned, the front 3 in-wall speakers are currently set to large, while the surrounds and overheads are all set to small with the recommended 100 hertz crossovers. Are modern AV receivers and speakers smart enough to protect themselves? And this isn't really something he needs to worry about. Are there other settings he should adjust to protect this audio system?
So I mean, this is. So I want to start, but let's just answer the question as is, because maybe this person is like, we are not spending any more money. We chose what we want, and this is it.
This is what you got, and this is what we're going to stick with, and that's it.
Yeah, if that's the case, I mean, you've done the main thing, which is set a limit on how high the master volume will go.
Yes.
That's the number one thing.
Yeah.
The setting it manually to the 4 ohm impedance, like in this case,
is the only time I would
you probably did do the thing that will protect this system. But
I would set the fronts to. I would put a crossover on the fronts as
well.
Oh
yes, I was going to get to that there in a second, but the 4 ohm impedance thing, what that does, all that does is stop the receiver from putting current into its amplifiers. It just chokes it off. It just this much and no more, and it just chokes it off. There's a whole bunch more power that could go into the receiver's amplifiers if you leave it in the default 8 ohm mode, but then it might put itself into protection mode and shut off, and it would have to be power cycled to function again. So you have probably somewhat inadvertently protected this the best, but it also means that it will. I mean, look. This system is never going to get loud enough. There's nothing you could do to make this system get loud enough. But it's also now 9 decibels quieter than it could be. So, I mean, it's really, really choking down how much can get out there. Now, you absolutely could change a setting in here with no problems, which is to set those front Sonant speakers to small.
Yes.
Give them, honestly, 100 hertz crossover as well. There's no reason not to. There's no way that those front speakers should be set to large. Now, also, perhaps completely inadvertently, you've done yourself a little bit of a favor with that I say favor, not performance favor, but a protect the speakers and amplifier favor by getting the Pioneer LX505, because that model was tested by Amir over at Audio Science Review, was tested by Gene over at Audioholics, and it has a strange function to it, an unusual function to it, which is that if it gets a signal that causes it to clip, which is happening in this room size,
There's no chance it's not, yes.
If it gets a signal that causes it to clip, it actually, instead of going into a full-on protection shutdown mode, it just chokes the amplifier wattage down to a maximum of 35 watts per channel. Any one channel. It's rated at 120 per channel. Yeah. It chokes itself down to a quarter at like 30, 35 watts a channel, and then stays there until you cycle the power, just like a protection mode. So it doesn't go silent. It doesn't have a I go silent protection mode. It has a I cut your volume by 6 decibels to keep myself safe protection mode. But it doesn't like go back to full power once the signal is safe again. It just stays at this 6 decibels quieter max headroom protection mode, which is almost certainly happening when you run all channel stereo mode and you actually are putting equal power into all 9 of these speakers being driven by an AV receiver. So you've basically, the one change I would make, set the front speakers to small and give them 100 hertz crossover. If you want to chance getting a little more output, you could change the 4 ohm setting back to 8 ohm, but then you're almost certainly going to activate the 1/4 power protection mode like instantly. So either way, you're kind of just choking the power to the amplifiers that are built into this AV receiver. There's nothing else you can do in the settings that's going to protect the speaker. But I mean, luckily you've kind of backed into protect, like the speakers aren't going to blow themselves up because that Pioneer receiver does have a lot of protection built into it. So they're not going to like kill themselves, but they're just never going to be loud enough. So with that in mind, if they are willing to spend a bunch of money, can we recommend some products? And we're not going to be the place that's telling you to get overpriced products. We're going to try to spend as little as we can.
So we got a couple of issues here that there's a lot of issues here, but one of the things that his subwoofers are going into protection mode. So those subwoofers are the Sonance ones require their DSP amplifier.
Yeah. Which I'm guessing did come with it. I mean, he's not powering those with the AV receiver.
Well, yeah. So, but what that means is if they're going to protection mode, that amplifier, I don't think you can just swap it out.
No, because the amplifier matches the drivers. It's just it's reached the limits of what it can play, and it can't play any louder. The signal is requesting it plays louder, and I go, I can't.
Yeah. So, I just don't see how you're going to be able to use those subwoofers full stop.
Nothing. I hate saying this because this feels awful, but none of those speakers, the subwoofers and the AV receiver, none of them are appropriate for this room. This room is huge room, and if you
should
just
be looking at PA speakers in here, really.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to think about it on the technical level, we're talking about what is sound pressure level, right? Think of what is any type of pressure, right? Pounds per square inch. You can think of it in those terms. We're thinking about we're trying to move this volume of air. Think about how much air is inside of this, what appears to be a ski lodge, right? And if we're saying, I want to create a level of pressure, sound pressure in this amount of air, how is a 3-inch diameter driver going to move that much air? That on that side of it, you just have to go, oh yeah, that makes sense. I'm trying to move.
Well, think if you were in a pool, right?
A swimming pool, yes.
If you're in an Olympic-sized swimming pool and you, how big of a rock do you have to drop in it before the wave will actually get all the way to the other side of the pool?
Or how big of a paddle do you have to move to make a wave that makes it from one end of that pool to the other end of the pool?
And still with enough, high enough that it laps over the side of the pool.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It has to be big. It has to be big. And that little 3-inch driver inside those Gallo speakers is just not going to do it.
So what we end up coming to is, you need to, I mean, if you want to get to, I can play music nice and loud in this gigantic open room and have a good experience, they're going to have to replace all of those speakers.
You are going to break. Well, let's put it this way: if you wanted to, so the solution that a lot of people might first, and in fact, we may also recommend here, like if you cannot switch the speakers. First of all, the subwoofers are dead to you. They cannot do anything. They are. I don't know what you're going to do with those subwoofers, other than because you can't. Because the amplifier has to be matched with the subwoofers, you can't increase the amplifier power or do anything with it because you're stuck with the amplifier that's there. So I think
you could increase the amplifier power, but then you would actually physically damage those 10-inch subwoofers. That's what would happen.
So each one of these speakers, like if you wanted to add an amp, like I said, mono blocks or whatever to these speakers, you could, but at some point the speaker is going to be damaged trying to put out the volume that you would require from it. So could you make it louder in this room? I think the answer is yes, you could, with an external amplifier that was very carefully calibrated and very carefulally limited.
No, but I mean, like those Gallo speakers, they're 60-watt speakers. And I mean, the Pioneer can supply them all the power they can handle.
Yes.
The 160-watt rating on the Sonance in-wall speakers, like the 120 watts of the Pioneer can drive those basically as loud as they can go.
Yeah.
So, I'm not necessarily going to say, because he's already installed, we're going to read next, but he's already installed the Pioneer AV receiver. And I'm like, you could still use that because it has pre-outs. Thank goodness. It has pre-outs. So I'm going to just start by saying that not the most expensive, but not the cheapest, but this is a good case for an Emotiva XPA series amplifier. I mentioned that one specifically because Emotiva has the correct amount of gain on its inputs that the Pioneer receiver you have, it tops out at about 2 volts RMS out of its pre-outs, which is not bad. It's fine. But I'm looking at an amplifier that can deliver more than 200 watts per channel for the speakers that I'm going to be recommending. And in order to drive it to its full power, Emotiva is one of the few brands that lets you connect it to, like, it needs about 1.7 volts to get to full rated power. And a lot of other really good amplifiers, they just require more voltage from the pre-out connection to get to their full rated power. The Emotiva is one of the ones that's affordable, really, really good, gives you more than 200 watts per channel, and can work with the AV receiver that you already have. And we're not asking you to spend exorbitantly to get it, but we're still talking $2,300 because I want you to get the 7-channel one, and you're only going to drive 2 of those speakers off of the Pioneer. Like, choose the top rears or something like that. So that's on the amplifier side. Now, subwoofer side, it's either going to be JL Audio, which is I can't imagine if this was the type of budget they were looking at. So RBH is not cheap, but they're one of the few that have in-wall subwoofers, because I'm not going to try to convince you not to use in-wall subwoofers with these clients. That's clearly what they want.
The problem.
RBH is one of the few that has subwoofers that I'm not going to say can actually pressurize this ski lodge size. They can't do that. But they have in-wall subwoofers that don't cost quite as much as JL Audio's, that will at least not go into protection mode. It's going to be really expensive. We're talking $7,000-$8,000 here. This is not cheap, but it's less than $13,000, $14,000, $15,000 from JL Audio. I mean, this is tough, but I'm trying to give you realistic, like, this is going to actually be able to work in this room and give you satisfying output. RBH could be a very good solution for replacing the front 3 in-wall speakers too. They absolutely have speakers that can deal with this sort of volume of air.
And they're the kind of company that you can call up and say, these are some pictures, this is the square footage, and they're going to give you decent advice.
But we are talking multi-thousands of dollars.
Yes, it's not going to be
no
cheap.
way to get away. So what could be lower price? So looking at the front 3 speakers, one that could work really nicely in here. Still a fully sealed design. You don't have to do anything different in the construction of the room. Aperian's Theatris series speakers are I can't say low cost. We're talking about $1,500 per speaker, but that is way less expensive than anything else that can actually deal with this sort of room size and matches really nicely with that Emotiva amplifier. Like, I'm putting together a system that will actually work and function and not damage itself and be able to give you the sort of output levels that you need. But you'd want to go for like the 8-inch models, the dual 8-inch drivers.
Not the slim, the big ones.
Not the slim, but I mean the in-wall, because we're still doing the in-wall so that we're not getting away from that aesthetic. But yeah, we're talking, $1,550 each for the dual 8-inch ones. I mean, that's way less expensive than anything else you could look at. Replacing those gallows, I don't know what we're going to do because the aesthetics were so much part of it, right? In terms of what sort of thing could you get at a low price, HSU's CCB8 speakers at $390 each. Like, at least they have the sort of power handling and efficiency that would be okay in this room, but they are just plain black and they're big. That's an 8-inch driver in there. That's not some nice satellite speaker. They are big, honking black speakers that I don't think match the look. So for that reason, Ascendo, a German speaker manufacturer, they have a high efficiency, high power handling, wedge-shaped speaker with a wonderful bracket. The bracket on this thing is the most flexible bracket. So if we're attaching it to those exposed rafters and we want to be able to have it blend in somewhat aesthetically, available in a white finish, which is kind of maybe going to look okay in here. They're $1,300 each, so they're around the same price as the Hyperion Theatric speaker. But believe me, this is so much cheaper than anything else you might be able to find.
These things are 93 dB efficient with 200 watts power handling at 8 ohms. I mean, you could put a massive amount of power into these things.
That's right. So, I mean, I'll have the links for all of those things. Have a look at them. Talk to your client with them. But realistically, this is the least expensive option they could get for something we're going to be like, yeah, I can actually throw a party in here, which I think has to be the idea. I can have the music going. Nothing's going to break. It's going to be sufficient, but everything has to be upgraded. There's no way to make those single 3-inch drivers fill this room space. There's no way to make those Sonance in-ceiling or in-wall speakers and subwoofers handle this room size. There's no way for the Pioneer receiver to power all of it all by itself. But you can keep the Pioneer receiver. You're going to use its pre-outs, attach it to an Emotiva amp, get these much more sensitive speakers all the way around, and it's going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars, but it's not going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, which other installers is what they're going to charge for this size of room.
Yes. Yes. And the pendants are, I mean, there's just no... I've seen like Klipsch, I think made some pendant speakers a while back, but I haven't seen them in years.
And they're not for this.
None of them are going to be.
They don't work.
Have the power handling that you need here. This is a massive, massive room, and like Rob said, you can go to a custom installer, and they will draw you up a solution.
Well, yeah, I mean, like he must have connections to somebody who's in Cedia. Like, being a custom integrator, he must know somebody who works in Cedia. But like, believe me, this is going to be $180,000, and we've got you to something that's under 20. So I'm like, okay, it's crazy, but
it's a lot of money.
That's a big difference in price.
So there's two real solutions here, I think, in my mind. First, what you've done is what you can do. Like, nothing, the subwoofers will never work. You should set a crossover for the front 3 speakers so that they don't blow themselves up.
Yeah.
The receiver, it's never going to get any louder in there. And you're just going to have to tell your clients that's it.
And most of the time, the receiver is going to be choking itself to be at least 6 decibels quieter than it can technically be, but at least it's protecting itself. At least there is still sound and it's not blowing up.
That's right. And that is the best. That's the best case scenario. Best case scenario is that there will be sound. It will not be loud. Yeah. And that will be it.
Yeah.
The other solution is to just make these upgrades that Rob's talking about. And I mean, I agree with all of them. We talked about this a little bit.
I want to give Tom a little bit of a heads up and also to see if he had any suggestions that I didn't think of. But
I came up with basically the same sorts of solutions that you did, which is like,
and probably not the Ascendos, since I've
never heard of those. Yeah. But I mean, I looked at all the normal high power handling stuff.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they're all very big for the most part.
A lot of them are
also
very plain
ugly.
Black. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's like the HSU ones, right? They're just horn loaded,
bigger and uglier than that. I mean, like, look, JTR would be a great choice performance wise, but they have nothing that matches the aesthetics that you're going for. Not even close. They are refrigerator sized black boxes, which great for the performance in this size of room. Fantastic. But I don't think that's what they were going for looks-wise.
That's right. You're clearly going for they are clearly going for aesthetic here. But I agree with Rob. I think his choices are good. RBH, like all around, you can make RBH work if you really wanted to. Again, they're expensive. They are, but they're good. Yeah. And, they will not, when you spend, like many things in life, there's a name brand thing that if you buy the name, like Sonos. I brought the Sonos, so it's more expensive because it's Sonos. With RBH, first of all, they're not that big of a name to begin with. But then as you go up in price, you literally do get more performance. You get something for it. It's not like, oh, well, this one is, got the special finish. We're like, no, we don't care about that. It actually sounds
if
better.
you went RBH all the way around in here, you're going to be into the $50,000-$60,000 range. Yes, which again is half the price or less than what the Cydia installer is going to tell you to get, but it's still way more than the under 20,000 that I managed to put together. Yeah. So I mean, you can pick it, but none of these are going to be actually cheap.
No, well, it's too big of a room.
It is.
It's just too big of a room.
We can't overcome the physics of it. There's no way to do it.
All right. So Justin's second part was he was hoping that running the Pioneer's included room correction might help to improve the sound quality a bit, but the receiver is installed in a remote location far away from this great room, so there's no convenient way to run the wire for the included measurement microphone, which is much too short anyway. Is there some way he could run the room correction, perhaps using the network cabling that is already installed? There's nothing that room correction is going to do. If you had the world's best room correction, but this is not a room that would do you any good. So it will not work. Can you extend that cable on that?
You sure could.
You can. You can extend the cable just using a...
But there's a better solution than that, which is the Pioneer LX505 does come with DIRAC. You don't have to pay any extra for DIRAC. It comes with DIRAC. So the only thing you would actually need to buy is a USB measurement microphone. We'd point you to the Mini DSP U-Mic 1, which is under $100. That's all you need to do. Get it from Cross Spectrum Labs.
That's right.
There's no reason not to get it nicely calibrated. He charges like $20 extra versus the price. So from Cross Spectrum Labs, get yourself a U-Mic 1, and that will let you just plug that USB mic into your laptop, and as long as your laptop and the AV receiver are on the same network, you can run DIRAC, and you don't have to pay any extra. You just have to get the microphone. If you end up doing these upgrades, these equipment upgrades, but you keep that Pioneer receiver, that'll still be the solution. Actually run DIRAC. In this case, just get the USB microphone.
I honestly don't think it's going to make a thing of a difference, but whatever. Yeah. Brian and his wife have recently moved into a new house. In their old place, he had an enclosed room that was roughly 10 by 16 feet. And in a new place, he also has an enclosed room that's a bit bigger, 12 by 18 feet. They don't use it strictly as a dedicated theater, but this is where the TV and sound system goes. He has already upgraded from his old 50-inch Vizio to a 65-inch Hisense U7N. It's not big enough.
It is if he's sitting close enough. Or maybe he's
in their old place, he was using a Marantz Slimline 7-channel receiver, but he only connected a 5.1 speaker system to it, a Sen HTM 200SC front 3 speakers with small Paradigm satellites for surrounds and a DefTech Supercube subwoofer. He tried out a pair of surround back speakers in the old place at one point because his wife actually really enjoys when she notices sounds coming from behind them, but the surround back speakers never really seem to add very much to the experience. Ha! I know. So he just stuck with 5.1, and they ran the surround speakers a bit hot so they'd be more noticeable.
That's A-okay.
Yes. He also ran the Marantz's Odyssey Room EQ, multi-EQ, Room EQ. Where the heck did that come from?
Well, it is.
Multi-EQ room correction, but ultimately thought their setup sounded better with Odyssey turned off. That means his room was not treated. So first up, he'd like to buy some new speakers. It's not that he has any complaints about the quality of this sound quality. Since he just wants to change things up a bit, including the looks. He's leaning towards the Aperion Novus series speakers. Any reason you should avoid those? Yes.
Oh.
Yes, you should absolutely avoid those, and instead spend money on room treatments.
Well, yeah, I can't disagree with that.
I will tell you right now, if you want a sound quality improvement, buy room treatments.
It wasn't even so much that
less than speakers.
Wants a sound quality improvement though, because he's actually happy with the sound quality he has now. He's just like, I want something that looks and is different.
That's fine too.
Yeah.
Buy the room treatments first. You're going to be amazed how much better your whole system will sound, and how much more you will like your current speakers. Now,
and the room treatments can double as decoration. You can get printed panels, or you can get panels that have a nice, pattern on the fabric. It doesn't have to just be a plain solid color. Everybody pictures the plain solid color.
Yes.
Like, I don't want those in my room. It doesn't have to look like that. It can look like artwork. So yes, consider that.
Yes, that's what I think.
Okay. But
Rob, you can answer it however you want.
No, if you ignore all of that and you're just like, I want to, like strictly as he asked, is there a reason to avoid the Hyperion Nova speakers? Well, I suppose if you are a pure objectivist who never wants to apply any EQ to your speakers, then they are not literally the most linear, most transparent speakers in the world. They have a few little deviations in their frequency response from strict linearity. But other than that, they're perfectly good speakers. They're perfectly nice speakers. And I would have no problem with anyone going with Hyperion's Nova speakers.
Yeah, I mean, sound quality wise, they're fine, but I do not think that there's a reason to do it.
Okay.
And I know that you want something a little bit different, blah blah blah, but wouldn't you be pleased if you also got a sound quality improvement when you made your upgrade? Wouldn't that be fun? If, like, all of a sudden everything sounded a little bit better in your room, because your wife likes to notice things that are coming from behind you.
Yeah.
That would actually be easier to achieve in a room that was treated. You can do a lot of stuff in a room that's treated.
You can more clearly differentiate the exact location of the sound when you remove some of that room reflection. Yeah.
Yes. So he asked, what AV receiver should he get? He's really puzzling over this. If he's going to do Atmos, but you think you didn't like surround backs. I'm sorry. He'd want to follow our advice and get an AV receiver that can do 4 overhead speakers, not just 2. But that means the price goes up, and after his experience with surround back speakers, will adding those 4 overhead speakers honestly be worth it? He's also not sure if it's worth paying more for advanced room correction program. And on top of all of that, he does not pay extra to get the higher tiers of the various streaming services, and they mostly just use YouTube TV and Netflix, but basic tier. Anyways, they do watch Blu-rays sometimes, but not often. Would it maybe be better in this case to just get a very basic 5-point receiver and pay as low as possible? Again, room treatments.
Yeah.
Do that, and then all this other stuff starts to make sense. I would... The first thing I would do is set up your room with your current equipment and live in there for just a little bit. Sure. A couple of months or something like that. Order some room treatments, pull the room treatments up, then live with it for a bit. At that point, if you're like, wow, this made a difference. This made a difference. Mm-hmm. Then you can start thinking about, well, maybe I can add more speakers to my system. Then the receiver and all the other stuff starts to make sense, because you never buy the speakers before you finish the room first.
Yes,
get the room
first,
and then go up. Now, I mean, the reason that whenever somebody says, I tried Odyssey and I didn't like it, I turned it off. It's because your room wasn't treated. Now, once you treat your room, you'll be able to use the Odyssey multi-Q that you have right now, which is still not the best multi-Q that there is. There's still better ones out there. But you will suddenly go, oh, wait a second. Now this actually made things sound better. Even more so than I thought. And all, the dynamic EQ, once you get that kicked in, everything will be kind of even no matter what volume you're at. It'll sound kind of relatively the same. And then you'll be enjoying the whole system more. And at that point, you can say to yourself, now I can experiment with surround backs. Now I can experiment with overhead speakers. Now I can experiment with these other things. And it's there'll be less concern over whether or not you're, at least in my mind, whether or not you're, if you're not hearing something, or if you are hearing something, if it's some sort of artifact of the room, or that the room's somehow masking it. Instead, you'll be able to say, well, I put surround backs back in and I didn't really hear anything. I didn't really care that much. I think once you do the room treatments, then you can start thinking about those overhead speakers. I still don't think surround backs or make all that much sense. In your room, it's maybe, it depends on, I guess, what direction he's sitting.
Yeah, 18 feet long, 10 feet from the front wall, so he's 8 feet behind him. Yeah, you could have surround backs for sure.
I think you've got room for surround backs. Yeah. Will it make that much difference to you?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe
if you place your surround speakers correctly, then it still doesn't make that much difference.
If you have an Xbox, then suddenly you'll have sounds coming from behind you again because your surround back speakers will be the one getting the surround sounds. But
I agree. Keep your current speakers for now. Do the room treatments. I agree with all that. Now, I don't know. Maybe he already got rid of the old AV receiver, or maybe it broke down, or maybe it just doesn't have the HDMI features that he wants. So right this second, I find it really tough to recommend anything other than snapping up an Onkyo NR7100 from Accessories for Less. Right. Because if you get the refurbished one, it's $600, $599.
Right.
And I mean, there's a ton of 5.1 and 7.1 receivers that aren't any cheaper than that. But you can also get a brand new A-stock, never been opened, from Accessories for Less, Onkyo NR7100 for $650 for $50 more than the refurbished. So if you really don't like the refurbished, like if you want the absolute lowest price you can pay, you get the refurbished one, the B stock one for $600.
Ridiculous.
But $650 for the brand new A stock. Now here's the thing: you might end up just using 5.1 on that thing, and there's no problem with that. Go ahead. One thing you can do with it is, since it can process 9 channels, if you do Dolby Atmos virtualization, then you'll still get the Dolby Atmos signal. You'll still get the like virtualized version of the overheads with 4-quadrant steering in it, because this is still a 9-channel thing. It has DTS Virtual X. So even if you physically only have 5 speakers, you're still getting some of that overhead effect. It's going to be using, psychoacoustic type of processing to trick your brain into hearing it, rather than having speakers physically above you or physically firing overhead. But you get all of those niceties to it. For the price, I'm like, it's really hard for me to say not to get an Onkyo 7100. It comes with DIRAC, like built in. You don't have to pay anything extra to get DIRAC. So yeah, I think that's the one to get if you just need to buy an AV receiver right now. HDMI 2.1 for all the ports, so you're up to date.
Yeah.
That's the one I'd point you to.
I think that's a good idea. Henry continues his quest to finally be happy with his front, left, and right speaker setup. He decided to follow our advice and stick with his current Paradigm Founder Series bookshelf speakers, but since he never liked how their former stands looked, he decided to get some new adjustable stands. He went with gravity speaker stands that can be adjusted in height, which he needs, since the floor in this theater is not level and there's a downward slope from left to right. Mm-hmm. I have lived that life, my son, my friend. I understand your pain.
He's like, I want those tweeters at the same level, and by golly, I'm going to have it.
Well, I remember when I set up my surround speakers, my dad came in my room and was like, your speakers aren't level. I'm like, nope, it's the ceiling. It's not my fault. The speakers are dead level. Shut up. I like it. I do like his furniture too that he's got. My wife doesn't like that furniture. I've tried to buy it a number of times. Something like that with the slats.
Kind of looks like a BDI, but it might be some other brand, but it's that type of style if you want to picture it. Yeah.
So he's happy with the stands themselves, but due to the slope of the floor and the carpet, he wound up needing some shims under the bases of the stands to keep them perfectly level. And even though we cannot really see them in the photos that he shared, he knows those shims are there, and he doesn't like how budget that feels. So he's wondering. He came across Andrew's review of the Fluence IB40 turntable isolation based on AV gadgets. The size is right. He likes the looks, and the price to get a pair of them is fine by him. And they have adjustable rubber damping feet and built-in bubble level, a built-in bubble level on top. So this is to put your record player on.
It is, yes.
And there's a bubble level built into this thing, and there's rubber feet that are adjustable. I think there's 3 of them. I might be wrong about that.
No, there's 4. There's 4.
Is there 4? Yeah, I get confused which ones he's reviewed. And then he could put the stand on top of that. That would be nice and level.
Speaker stand would go on top of this. What's meant for a turntable ostensibly, but it gives them the leveling. It's the nice looks. It's no longer budget feeling. And they're not crazy. What are they, $120 each? Something like that. So, I mean, more than I would probably pay personally, but that's not like we're not
if he's okay with it,
okay. Yeah, if he's okay.
So he just wants to know, is there any reason not to get a couple of those Fluence turntable isolation bases and put them under the bases of his gravity speaker stands instead of shims to level them on his sloped floor? I mean, there's no world in which I do it, because I am far too cheap.
Sure.
But if it doesn't bug you, I don't see any problem with it. I would consider putting an extra layer of cushion between the bottom of the stand and the top of the base. The simple reason being that a turntable isn't nearly as heavy as your stands and speakers together are, and I want to make sure.
This is literally just a piece of veneer wrapped MDF, so I'm not worried about weight limits or something like that. It's just it's a big old thick piece of MDF with a veneer wrapped around it.
I just want to make sure there's no vibrations going into the floor. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
So a little piece of foam or whatever underneath there would be.
The only thing I'm not sure about is they are rubber feet. So, I mean, this is going on carpet on top of a sloped floor, but they're kind of conical shaped rubber feet.
I don't remember what these things look like.
And it's just, I'm not sure how much height adjustability they have, because this is like the idea behind it was, I'm putting my turntable on top of this isolation, pad thing, and I'm like leveling out a slightly unlevel table or a slightly unlevel equipment stand or something like that, and it sounds like the slope of this floor underneath his carpet is like a not inconsequential amount of slope, going down from left to right in this room. And I'm like, I don't know if those adjustable feet have enough adjustability to actually get you perfectly level on the sloped floor, because it's only meant for a little bit of unlevelness in your equipment stand that your turntable is going on. So I'd want to double check. I'd want to just double check that it's actually going to have enough adjustability to make it level on this floor for you, because otherwise it's defeating the purpose.
Yeah, I guess as long as it's got the adjustability that you need.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I guess I would be concerned about. The rest of it, I mean, I'm not worried about
the rest
weight.
of it, I'm fine with doing
about anything else. Yeah. So, I mean, just buy them from someplace where you can you can return them easily. Does that say 12:30?
Getting pretty close. 4 minutes too. Yeah.
Yeah, we're done. I have to go.
Okay, you got to go. Okay. Well, that means on our list we have Infinite Gary, Chris, Eliezer, and Miguel. That should be. Oh, Sasi as well was on that list there. We had a whole
sorry
bunch.
about that, guys. We went a little long because of Rob's.
Tom was a little distracted. That's right. Oh yes, it was all me going on this week. Sure was.
I want to thank our listeners of the week. I want to thank David and Eliezer for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and leaving us a PayPal donation. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, David. Thank you, Eliezer.
We want to thank our 133 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast, including Niels. Thank you very much.
And Jorge as well. Yeah, that was patreon.com.
Oh, Jorge, I'm sorry.
Yeah, your favorite name to say.
My favorite name.
Leave it out. That was patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thanks to our 133 patrons over there. Niels, thanks for being one of our first. Jorge, thanks for being one of our newest.
Yeah, thank you, Infinite Gary, for sending me a movie code for the test out for him.
That's right. Thank you, Infinite Gary.
And thank you for those of you that thanked us with notes of gratitude, including Matt, Gib, Brian, Karl, Niels, Jorge, Max, and Sasi.
Yes, I'll say the names one more time. Matt, Gib, Brian, Karl, Niels, Jorge, Max, and Sasi. Thank you all so much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement. We definitely appreciate them. We'll see how many people stick around after our horrible, polarizing takes on this podcast. But maybe you just skipped past it all with the timestamps and you never knew what was mentioned about those things. But big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.